Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome, Shabbat Shalom. We still have some people probably will be dropping in. And remember that we just got off of the Tabernacles Feast. We had a wonderful time at the Saluda River Resort here in South Carolina. We had several families join. It was just a blessed time, and I'm very grateful to be able to partake in that this year, and I'm looking forward to next year. And I hope you guys were able to do something for Sukkot, even if it's something as perhaps personal as putting a tent up in your yard or maybe just enjoying nature. But the memorial of the Messiah's coming kingdom, that's what Sukkot is about. Did you know that? That the Atid Lavo, as the Jews call it, this is the world to come, which is going to be much better than our world. There'll be no more war. It actually says that they will beat their implements of war into farming instruments, that the lifespan of mankind that make it into the Atid Lavo after all the desolations will be increased. There are prophecies that seem to indicate this. And there's also prophecies that seem to indicate that the animal kingdom will be restored to harmony with mankind. Even things like lions, which are typically predatorial, and poisonous snakes that, they're not going to harm anything. It actually says on all my holy mountain, and it actually says that the pots and pans are going to be inscribed with the phrase Kadosh Yahweh, which is holiness unto Yahweh. And so the knowledge of Yahweh is going to fill the earth as the Messiah returns and inaugurates his kingdom. And that's really what Sukkot is all about. We get out of our comfort zone, we get into the tent, and, we're tabernacling together, aren't we? And so now that we have finished the very last feast of the cycle, we are beginning a new year for the Torah portion, and that is in Genesis. And there's a lot here. In fact, it's one of my favorite portions to go over. Now, additionally, along with that, we have a guest with us. Liz McGee is joining us. I chose Liz McGee to speak for us because she follows current events very closely. I can tell on her channel that she really follows what's happening in Israel. She's following what's happening in social media with regard to the rise of anti-Semitism, with regard to all of these and many of the prophecies that are coming to pass. And so I gave her the Watchwoman slot today. Then we have Sister Sandra will be doing our health minute, and then we will continue as I read and give commentary, including, as I mentioned before, the book of Jasher. We're going to take a little snippet from there, which matches the portion today, which is Bereshit, in the beginning. That's what Bereshit means, in the beginning. And that's Genesis 1, continuing on to Genesis chapter 6. So, I want to welcome the latecomers. Welcome, Brother Giacomo. Welcome, Jerry. Welcome, everyone that's made it. And we're going to get started now. The recording is on. And of course, as normal, what I do is I edit out anything like spaces and things, and we'll get this uploaded to the website as we've done before. Also, remember the last Shabbat, we actually did have a Shabbat in this room, even though I said we might not. I didn't know what the situation would be, but we do have the recording of Elder Pete Rambo, and he did a smashingly good job on discoursing what is going to happen in the future according to Scripture. And he had a whole list of scriptures he went through, and it talked about the second Exodus. It talked about how during the time of Jacob's trouble, we're going to sort of be gathered together, and then we're going to make our way to the land. Exactly what the timing on that is, we're not sure. There's some dispute among people who study those things. But we believe that it will happen shortly.
Well, Greg, thank you. Thank you very much. for having me on and giving me this opportunity. And we have to connect. We go way back uh, and have been tracking this and following this unfolding story for a long time. But I do have a take, so to speak, and actually it has just gotten turned on its head a little bit in the last week or two. But what you were saying about we are coming into a greater exodus and going a reunification and coming back into the land. But what I have done in my like Torah study, I have gone deep into what is called, I don't know if you remember with Jewish exegesis called Pardes. So I have found that the secrets, the real intel on prophecy and this kind of stuff is in these kind of, they have a couch in a little bit deeper level. It just takes a lot more Torah study to figure out the players. But I've been on this for over 15 years, specifically the two houses, looking at this thing. And I've come to two conclusions. So I want to give it quick because it might not be your, but I have decided that in the Torah, when it talks about there's like, it talks about the two houses. I mean, there's total verses, two nations, two chosen families. There's two backslidden sisters. There's two olive trees. There are two sticks. There's two witnesses. Remember that one. There's two lampstands. There's two advents. And there are two cherubim. And that's really kind of all sort of in this two, this 10 and this two kind of concept. So I'm focusing on the two witnesses and the two lampstands because I grew up as a Christian, very pashat, which is called very fundamental, like just a plain meaning. So if there's two witnesses, that's two men. And, everybody kind of wanted to be either Enoch or Moshe or who were the witnesses. I would think to a guy that would be the ultimate spiritual mantle to be one of the witnesses. But I don't believe in this literalness anymore. I do believe that pulling way back and looking at God's point of view, he's way up high. He's got 7,000 years he's working with us, basically, that we can kind of know a little bit about. But 6,000 we lived through. And he's trying to get us to this point of reunification. But it's really, to me, it is more like these offspring of Jacob, which to a certain is little, has multiplied into billions of people in the earth. I mean, we really are a multitude. And we're in all sorts of different places. So it's a little tricky to bring it all back together. But if you look at the birthrights, this is where I'm going. The birthright that is over Ephraim, the birthright that is over Judah. And okay, so now we're in the end times. It is my very studied opinion, and this is something that has been creeping up on me for years and years and years. And now looking at the landscape, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Father, I think that what we have here is what the Jews, what the Christians, when Messiah ben David, who is the prophesied second advent Mashiach, as far as I can understand from scripture, the Jews have been waiting for him the whole time, place holding the city of Jerusalem, waiting for the king to come. That when that starts to happen, and that starts to happen in the geopolitical landscape of the whole world, starting in Jerusalem, that is what the Christian church, especially the Christian church that is beginning to be hijacked by this, really, which is hatred for the brothers. It's a spirit of Lashon Hara and evil speaking, and they have replacement theology. This camp that is no Torah understanding are going to call the Antichrist. So what I'm saying, it is a perfect storm. You're going to have huge pockets of the camps that many of us have left calling this figure the Antichrist. And we're going to be saying, no, 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 no. Hold on. This is truly what we've all been waiting for. And it's going to be a mess. I mean, it's going to be a mess. That to me is part of what's going to bring a lot of the chaos. Now, I used to think that totally, I know about the Luciferians and, I mean, we're all up to speed, I'm sure, to a certain extent on how dark the darkness is and what the evil deeds these people do in darkness. But I've always been a Trump supporter. I prayed for revival in this nation for our children forever. As a mother of Israel, I have two boys that need to get, with the program pretty quick. But I think that if it goes south, so what we're poised now is with this peace treaty. Doesn't this sound like what they say? We've always been told there's going to be a peace treaty, and then peace, and then comes sudden destruction, and then everything kind of tips over. And I can't say that's so perfect right now with the scenario we have. And yet, how could Trump be part of that? How could that be happening? So there's a lot of ways that this thing can blow apart. But the point is, we are poised for something very extreme. And besides, I don't believe for a second that the evil seed, whatever you want to call them, are just going to sit down, just sort of sit it out now and say, all right, you got your peace deal. We'll just all wait for the king to come. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to throw everything they got. And everything they got is going to blow most people out of the water because it's going to include quote unquote ancient aliens and civilizations, ascended master, whatever they're going to come back with, all of this rewritten narrative. So that is sort of my prophecy uptake because I don't think people are so looking like they think that the North, you were saying a lot of these words I have come to understand are coded that the Torah is taking what seems to be a natural direction. We all know what North is. North is North, and North is not necessarily a hospitable place in many places. And it's not. It's cold. It takes a lot to live there and eke out a living. It's a place of judgment. And so spiritually, the North becomes a place of judgment, a place where you go for exile. They used to send them to Siberia, right? Isn't that what the Russians used to send them up to that? I think it was called Siberia. Um, and that's the purpose. And so that's when we get sent in, or when a nation, when you go in. So when you go into captivity, a lot of times you go up to the north. And then it says, because it says this huge gathering that's coming together at the end of the age. See, Greg, I don't believe there's no way, just being logical, there's no way that can be literal, even greater Israel. There's too many billions of us to fit there. The land is the whole earth. That makes more sense. We're going to and we can live anywhere we want with great technology. I like what Jackson used to say, we're all going to pick your spot, but I'm thinking that if we have this is what I'm getting to the soul of our country. We are Israel. We are the birthright nation. We carry the governmental seat of the birthright of the blessing on us, even in this country. I absolutely believe that. And Judah has still retained the scepter for the king and the Sefer household. They are the house of study, the Torah. They kept the Torah for us, and we have to go and submit back to them. And I do believe that. But both birthrights are trying to do their thing right now. And they're both clueless that they can't really do one without the other. And the whole point is to bring them together to recognize each other on a global level, and especially America and Israel. I mean, why are we just, it's all about us. It's all about Jerusalem. It's all about the Arabs. I mean, the only people groups in the world. So I'm just sort of saying, I think it is getting very close. I do believe this with AI, everything it can happen. And it can I see this chaos because the church, there's a portion of it that still loves their idols. We know that they are not with the program, and they could create a lot of problems. And they are doing it now. I mean, we see this Candor Tuckus, this movement going on. They're like, well, I can get very passionate about it because I yell at the video as they're saying all this stuff. Do you know that we're evil now? Not just the Luciferian people in the government, like us, people who love Israel, support Israel. We are part of the evil people. Talk about black becoming white. So anyways, that's pretty much what I want to say. But I have, if I can give a little plug, because I have written a book and I have a new website that I'm launching, and I'm trying to get all my material organized and brought up to speed and out there more and more, because I should make this disclaimer. Jackson knew this, and I do study deeply on what is called in parts the soul level, and that includes the Zohar and the Kabbalah and all of that type of mystical studies. And I'm quite an expert in it. And that is where you find, in my opinion, this, and the two houses have known this, that Rashi, I mean, even in his commentaries, which are total b'shat, he talks about Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph, and they talk about each other in the commentary, like how Messiah ben David had to die. One man had to die for the nation. And I'm like, how come this isn't common knowledge? It's just buried so deep, and we are not, neither house is the Torah scholars that they should be. But I think events are coming that are going to wake us all up. And if you don't have oil in your lamp by now, I don't know, it might be a little late, but we'll see. So,
Okay. And so what I understand is that the two houses coming together is definitely in our future, and Judah's going to have to
mhm,
give a little, and
yeah.
Ephraim's going to have to give a little. And in a general sense, Judah's what they're going to have to give is it's kind of like the old Chinese proverb, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And the whole world right now is turning against Judah. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're going to look for allies, and they're going to find allies among Ephraim, but they're going to have to lower their rhetoric a little bit with regard to their hatred of and in their mind, the prophet that Ephraim reveres. We know he's more than a prophet, but they would explain it as a prophet being Yeshua Messiah. But Ephraim regards him as the Messiah. And so, as we see these things coming together, what I can see is these forces, the external forces, are going to be powerful enough to push them together. Now, with regard to this Messiah Ben David character, that remains to be seen. I've seen some people who believe this figure will be a benevolent figure, and maybe he will be. But I guess the test will be after this period of time that the Bible seems to ascribe 7 years, that in the middle of that, it says that somehow there's going to be a conflict and he's going to turn against the house of Judah. So maybe you interpret that differently, Liz,
Well, I think
but
I
that's
know. Yeah, just to jump in a little bit, because I know a lot of this is the texts are even a little bit slanted towards the narrative, the object, like the verbs and the what they call the pronouns and the adjectives sometimes point this way. But um, I just want to say this: I do see Messiah and David. I don't know, benevolent. What they're saying is David in a sense because he united the kingdom, number one, but by war, in the sense, he had to fight the enemies of Israel. I see a figure rising. See, the problem with Israel is nothing they do is right, no matter what, no matter how protective they are, they're not genociding anybody. But it's like nothing they do is good enough or can be right. But this figure is going to emerge, I believe, who will be able to win against this onslaught of the nations in a way that is going to so minimize human and it just is going to astound people. Like, where does this guy get this skill, this which is going to elevate him in the sense that he's just not a normal, that the father has sent a deliverer in this sense. So I think it's going to come about in a way that is going to astound people because he's not going to do it in the old militaristic way, but he's gonna win the wars against Gog and Magog, which is against these spiritual, this hatred, the spirit, the principalities and powers, sort of that are dogging Israel. That's sort of how I read it. So I do see, um, but I think Judah, both of the houses have a lot of air in them, and they both have to come clean.
okay. All
But
right.
I can
Well,
make one last point, Greg. I'm sorry, I know you're on time. The reason this disturbs me so much because America, because we don't really know who we are, and it depends on where we are in our government, who is in power. But if our nation truly does, public opinion wants to turn our nation against Israel and join the nations against wiping these people finally into the sea, right? That would be this is all. So the question is, who are we? Are we one of the nations, or are we a birthright nation? Because there's a whole prophecy, of another place, all this that he would give the seed of Ephraim, which is huge, another place. And
mhm.
I just see this all fitting. So those are all different things, more videos, different things, but for talking
Okay.
about. But thank you for your time and the opportunity. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing, Liz. And I
Watch
agree
and
with
wait.
you. We have to be part of a set apart nation, not
Mm-hmm.
part of the nations, as it says in Zechariah 14, that will get judged when
Mm-hmm.
they surround Jerusalem and the holy city, and they have an intent to annihilate one half of the Commonwealth of Israel, that being the Jewish nation. So that means that these Gentile nations and maybe America will turn that direction. We would hope not, but that would put us persona non grata within that nation, and that may. We're going to move to our health minute, and we have Sister Sandra Watley with us, and she's going to be doing a health minute on the wonderful onion. So, do we have you on there, Sister Sandra?
I am. I am here. I think I
Okay.
probably need to eat some onions right now. I've got this kind of nasally thing going on. So, onions are just one of those things that people you either love them or hate them. There doesn't seem to be an in between. I know that when I was growing up, I would not even go near an onion. My mom would chop them so fine, and I would sit there for an hour picking them out. But I was always sick as a child. I had strep throat 3, 4, 5 times a year. I had scarlet fever. And I honestly think if I had eaten onions, I probably would have been a lot better off. Of course, now I eat them and I love raw onions. But boy, if you can get your kids to eat onions and you're having health problems, it's really a good thing to get them on them. So onions are really high in vitamin C and B6, folate, and potassium. They have calcium, magnesium, iron, and manganese. And they contain, I always have a hard time with this word, quercetin and sulfur compounds. So uh, that's a good abundant list for any herb or anything we eat, especially something that's common. It's a lot better for you than most of the lettuce we get. So keep that in mind. So it does help reduce blood pressure and lower bad cholesterol. And studies have shown that it does help with blood pressure or blood vessel function. So a lot of people are having vein disease. It might be a good time to up your onions. They reduce inflammation and ease arthritis. They have done studies. They are anti cancer. Then they help slow the growth of the tumors and also neurodegenerative diseases. So um, I would suggest making sure you get them at least 3 or 4 times a week at minimum. The interesting thing about the sulfur compounds that are in onions is that they play a great role in forming your hair and muscle skin. I don't think it has biotin per se. Maybe sulfur compounds are biotin, and I didn't really look into that, but nonetheless, they're really good for you. They, uh, if you're having gallbladder issues, they might help digest fat too. So they're going to help keep your joints healthy and support your liver also. And a lot of people seem to be having problems with liver. Yeah, this is the reason why I brought it up is, what Liz is talking about and what we've been talking about. We never know when we're going to find ourselves in a situation where antibiotics are just not available. So the thing that really got me with onions was an old lady friend of mine. I was like 25 and she was 72. And she was telling me that, people just didn't get sinus infections back when she was a kid. And pretty much if you saw somebody that got sinus infections, they were sick people to begin with. So basically, it was people who had poor nutrition. But she told me that they would boil onions and then cool the water and then sniff the water up their nose. She said that she thought it worked a lot quicker and a lot better than the antibiotics. She still used the method. But back then, I was still at the stage where I wouldn't go. You went within 10 feet of an onion. So I never tried it, but she swore by it. And then I knew another elderly gentleman that he swore by every time he got a cold, he would slice an onion and then just turn it black with pepper on top and eat that. And the next day, his cold would be gone. So these are some common household cures. Onions are one of those things that grow fairly easy and they store well. So if you're having problems, sinuses, respiratory type thing, uh, onions are definitely something that you want to look at to help cure the problem. They're cheaper, they're easier to obtain, easier to store, and most people aren't going to think about them. So don't go crazy. Of course, excess of anything is not good for you, but don't pass them up. Um, the interesting thing about black peppers, I was thinking about just doing them both together. Black pepper is really great for sinus problems too. And when I was a kid, I wouldn't touch black pepper either. Uh, but so it's always a good combination, black pepper and onions. Try and eat the purple ones. They're the best. But if you're having repeated sinus infections, try to really cut down on your processed food, your wheat, things like that, sugar, but also add spirulina or moringa. I went through a stage in my life where, like, every 6 weeks, I was having a sinus infection, and I started on high doses of spirulina, and that was about 20 years ago, and I think I've only had one sinus infection since. So, uh, you know, eat your greens and eat your onions. So that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, sister. We do have a question here. Somebody's asking, what are the best ones? I think you mentioned the purple. Do you have any advice on anything beyond that?
Well, purple onions are the best. I would stay away from the sweet onions. I just don't think that they're going to have the same properties. When you start adding sugar into the vegetable world, um, it's not necessarily a good thing. And when you're dealing with a sinus infection or something like that, sugar is just so hard on it. So I would avoid the sweet varieties of onions. They taste good. They're because they're so mild, but try to stick with the stronger, the yellow or the purple onions. Red onions are better. They're just going to be stronger and better when you're dealing with sinus infections.
Okay. Well, it's amazing the kind of medicine our Heavenly Father leaves for us, but we just lack the knowledge generally as a people to know that that could fix a problem we're suffering with, and we've just been basically propagandized to always go to the doctor when in reality, probably I would say upwards of 90% of what we encounter in life with regard to illness or virus or whatever can be solved with some of these great things like onions and whatever else is on the earth the Father provides. So it's a great body of knowledge. And I should mention as well, I believe in one of the books that actually says that Noah had a book of cures from the earth, natural herbs and things. He studied that carefully according to, it might be the book of Jasher possibly, but this also was something that the early church was familiar with because, when they were under persecution, they didn't have access to, the kinds of services that normal people did with regard to getting healing. And so even today, I think this applies, and this is why we have the Health Minute. So thank you so much for this presentation, Sister Sandra. And today we're going to be looking at the first Torah portion. Now in a new cycle. Remember, we finished up the last feast, and now we are setting the clock again. We are in Genesis chapter 1, and it goes all the way to Genesis chapter 6, verse 8. And then we're also going to look chapter 1 in the book of Jasher. Now, I've chosen some pictures here because this section of scripture talks about the creation narrative. You'll notice that I made it a point to show some of the art that has been done over the centuries that seems to picture this event we're going to be reading about, which is the seduction of Eve into disobeying our Heavenly Father. And you might be surprised to know that the seductress, if I may use that term, uh, that this narrative has been in existence for centuries, and that being that it was a female seductress. Now, those of us who understand about the desire to return to patriarchy, the desire to bring order to our homes, being that we are, here at Hebrew Messianic Israel, we're a member of the Assembly of the Righteous, which is a new, um, basically a general conference of people who believe the same principles. You understand, and maybe you have experienced how other women can whisper into your wife's ear and cause her to stray. Have you ever experienced that? You ever experienced where it happens sometimes in church when a husband and wife and their children go to a church and the old women get around this newly married wife? And what happens? They teach her basically, remember what Messiah said to the Pharisees? He said, you travel land and sea to win a single convert, and when you do win them, you turn them into twice the son of hell as you. Well, let me tell you, this happens for females too. And if we can understand that, if we have ever experienced the misfortune of such an occurrence, then we can perhaps more easily connect with this being that was whispering in Eve's ear, not only to disobey her husband, but to disobey Abba Yah and partake of something she was not allowed to partake of. Exactly what that is a bit of a mystery. But these pictures show this female entity that is doing such. And so we're going to read about this a little bit in the book of Genesis, and then we're going to look and see what Jasher has to say. I think Jasher more uh, gives more details on the Cain and Abel event. So let's take a look at this together in Genesis chapter 1. Yeah, I see that comment there, Brother Giacomo. This all comes from this being. Yes, this chief being, whoever you ascribe it to, some people ascribe it to Lucifer with female traits. Some people ascribe it to Lilith. However you ascribe the identity of this being, the result is the same, a woman being led astray from the truth. Okay. And as husbands, we are admonished to make sure we look after our household. And sometimes things happen, we think we are looking after it, and somehow the devil just gets in anyway. And this then requires patience of the saints, doesn't it? And so we're going to learn a little bit about this uh, in the book of Genesis. Okay, so Genesis 1, and as we do before, we will read, and then if you have something you would like to add to this discussion, raise your hand, and we'll get you on the mic. All right. So here we go. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, we see that phrase. This is where we get the Hebrew name for the book. Remember that the name of the book is in the first phrase of the book. Did you know that in Hebrew? So Bereshit means in the beginning. Okay. And then so on with all the other five books of Moses. So in the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Elohim saw the light that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So there's the first day, darkness and light. And Elohim said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And Elohim called the firmament heaven, and evening and morning were the second day. Okay, so the second day, you've got the firmament separating land from the waters, right? And Elohim said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. Okay. And so we have the moon, the stars, and so on. The moon actually is a reflector. It's probably the stars, more likely. And Elohim made two great lights, the great light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Remember that the sun generates its own light, but the moon is reflecting light. And Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. Interesting, interesting. I just had a thought come into my mind. Parallel. If our Heavenly Father, and we are assured of this, is the generator of power, then his creation, it stands to reason, are resonating his power. Similar in the way that the moon resonates the light, reflects the light from that body which generates light, which is the sun. Interesting. That actually, I just thought of another sermon and taught, I thought of another sermon on how the devil works and how he's restricted and how Yahweh is unlimited. Interesting. Think about that one. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day, and Elohim said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath light, and fowl that may fly over the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And Elohim created great whales and every living creature that moves, which the water brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So we have all of these creatures of the sky and of the sea on the fifth day. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And Elohim made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. So now we've got the land creatures. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image after our likenesses, and let them, well, it's this, let us make man in our image after our likenesses, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Interesting. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him, male and female created he them. Now, I'm going to pose a possibility here. And you can study this out for yourself. And if you have further questions on where I'm going with this, there's a particular book I'd like you to look into. I've actually recorded it on our HMI website. But I'm going to pose the possibility that this is a separate event than what we're going to read about later. But think about that. Maybe you don't agree with that thesis, but that's my thesis, okay? And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps upon the earth, wherein there's life, I have given every green herb for meat. Notice this. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps upon the earth, wherein there's life, I've given every green herb for meat. So is it possible lions were eating plants like the ox? That is the belief. That's the idea. When you study this, that is how it was in perfection. If you look at the millennial kingdom, it is restored right back to the way this is. That animals no longer are animals, that lions and predators are no longer animals of prey that prey upon other animals. They don't do that anymore. They eat the grass like the ox. And actually, there's prophecies in Isaiah that literally say this. Did you know that? That our world is so out of kilter right now that we have a separation between prey and predator, but it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way before. Some people laugh at that and they say, oh, we can look at the teeth. We can just look at the teeth and see the sharp teeth, and that determines whether or not an animal is a predator. And then look at the different type of teeth in a cow, and that determines whether that one is a prey and just eats herbs. Well, guess what? There's all kinds of animals on the earth, even today, that have sharp teeth that look like a predator, but all they eat are plants. Did you know that? Oh, yeah. Study that out. You'll see. All right. So, all these things. Um, oh, well, Giacomo probably would have a lot to say about that question there. Does that mean we should all be vegetarians? Uh, Here's what I think. I think that in the Athi Lavo, we may very well return to vegetarianism because the conditions will be such that will sustain life, and the weather will be such that it will be very timid weather. Right now, we have very stark and sharp seasons, especially in the northern climes. And I've talked about this before, that there were great and catastrophic changes that happened to the earth after the flood, which necessitated in some regions that mankind should have animal flesh in order to get the protein. Now, some might disagree with Brother Smith about that, but that's what I've turned up in my study. And Elohim saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Okay. Obviously, our world today is very different than what is described here in many ways, you know. All right, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day. This is how we know that the seventh day was not some borrowing of a concept from Egypt that Moses just came up with in order to set the Israelites apart from all the other nations, that it was his own imagination. This is the lunacy that so-called studiers of the Bible are proposing, and particularly they are in the church. The churches have got this wrong big time. Notice that Yahweh himself rested on the seventh day from all the work that he made. Now, the Catholic Church, I don't like to pick on the Catholic Church because they've done a lot of good. They have a lot of good things, but I pick on the Catholic Church only in this one instance, in that they are the first to have altered this. And they say so themselves. So I'm not saying anything they're not saying, but there are several quotes that say that it was the Pope in the fourth century that transferred the solemnity of the seventh day Sabbath to the venerable day of the sun. And they say they did this because of Jesus. And they have lots of reasons for that, but the truth remains they changed things because that's not the way it was in the first, second century. It began to be that way in the third century, and it was solidified in the fourth century. But the seventh day, after Yeshua went into heaven and promised his disciples that he would come back in the same manner in which he rose, after that event, then for 2 centuries, the seventh-day Sabbath was still guarded by the majority of Christianity until the change happened. And so, where do we find this principle? No, it's not just the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. You know how they talk about the Jews all the time, those rascally Jews. Yahweh himself rested on the seventh day in the garden. Notice this. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created and made. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. Now, this verse right here, just this one verse, there's an incredible amount of teaching. And it's far more than you can imagine. Just in this one verse, the generations of the heavens separated from the generations of the earth. Very interesting. And I'll give you some clues. You can look in Enoch. You can look in the Hebrew itself in Genesis. We don't have time to get into any of that. If you want that information, go to our website, and there's books on there that talk about this in detail. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for Yahweh Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But notice that man did not have to work by the sweat of his brow to make things grow so that he could eat. Notice this was the perfection. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground, and Yahweh Elohim formed man. So what is this saying? It's saying that the conditions were such that stuff was growing at such an incredible rate that nobody had to put seed in the ground and till and whatnot. This was a beautiful garden that was self-growing, that there was plenty of food, and nobody had to do any hard work to get it because it just came up naturally. And Yahweh Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So this seems to presuppose that if it says it was a garden eastward in Eden, what about westward or southward or northward in Eden? Is Eden simply a code word for that perfect world that Yahweh created before the fall? And that somehow Yahweh set up a domain for man eastward? Interesting things to think about. And out of the ground made Yahweh Elohim grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden. Now, there's a lot here, just in this right here, the tree of life and the identity of that. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads. Now, there's this has to do with these four major rivers that are in existence even today. The name of the first is Pison, which compassed the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. I would sure love to know exactly for sure where Havilah is on a map. Wouldn't you like to know that? Brett, take your pickaxe and your shovel. I might just do that. And the gold of that land is good. There's bdellium and the onyx stone, and the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compassed the whole land of Ethiopia. Now, this one they give us an indicator here. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is which goes toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. And Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Interesting. So what does this mean, to dress it and keep it? I mean, maybe there was an aspect of him looking after it, possibly. Maybe harvesting, He didn't have to sow or break the ground up. The stuff was growing on its own, but he still probably harvested, And Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not even eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die. And Yahweh Elohim said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet. Now notice this. Didn't Yahweh make male and female? He made them. Okay, now traditional interpretation says it's just a restating of the same event. Okay, but I'm challenging you to consider the possibility it's a separate event and it deals with a separate situation. Yahweh Elohim said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make a help meet for him. So how in the world did this man get alone? If he made male and female them, now he's alone. And out of the ground Yahweh Elohim formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Now, when you name something, that is an aspect of creation, isn't it? You are assigning something. You're assigning identity. You're assigning character. You're assigning, you are in a way, it's like, it says we shall make man in our own image. Yahweh creates according to his pleasure, and he assigns characteristics and so on to those. And man is naming these creatures now. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him. Interesting. And Yahweh Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from man made he woman and brought her unto the man. Now notice, I like to point this out because it opens up a lot of other scriptures for understanding. Notice in this case, it's not man and woman, he them. In this case, it's man, he's alone, and he takes woman from man. You see the difference? Very interesting. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Interesting. Exactly what that means. Does it mean in a literal sense? Does it mean yeah, I mean obviously it means in a literal sense because clothing had to be given to them later, but maybe there's something else deeper. I mean, does that mean that they were like innocent like children? They're just unaware of too? I mean, that kind of thing. Okay, so we don't have too many comments so far. Not too many comments. Anything people want to chime in on before we continue on? Okay, all right. I hope I haven't put you to sleep. It's kind of a big one this week. Now the serpent was more subtle than all the beasts of the field which Yahweh had made. Notice this. That subtle part right there. You know what that means? That means somebody who has an ability to get their way, but it's not in such a way that's easily discerned. But that subtlety is a tool they use to get their way. Husbands might be aware of this, and I've been caught many times. Uh, Here's the deal. The subtlety part is something that can be employed to where if it's done in a very skillful way, let's say with regard to a wife toward a husband, the husband doesn't even know that he's been played until after. Okay, that's part of what subtlety is, okay? All right. And women have this gift. I suppose men do too, but um, interesting there. So the serpent, and he said unto the woman, Yea, hath Elohim said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Now notice the question here. You shall not eat of every tree of the garden. That's not what Yahweh said, but it frames it in such a way that Yahweh is restrictive. He's too restrictive. You see the intent behind that? And the woman clarifies, says, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, Elohim has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. You see? So have you ever experienced a discussion, let's say even politics, to where the other side is framing something in such a way that it makes you look bad, your side bad? Okay? In other words, the way something is framed, an argument is framed, has a lot to do with the perspective, the point of reference of the person who's framing that question, doesn't it? And notice this. And so the serpent this is part of the subtlety, you see. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall not surely die. Notice this. You shall not surely die. In a way, that's truth, but it's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth, isn't it? Because these were very simple creatures. They didn't understand the reality. For Elohim doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Interesting. So this seems to imply that there was a childlike innocency in Adam and Eve. that unaware of evil. As a child, you just kind of go la-di-da through life. You depend on mommy and daddy for everything. You eat good food. You usually are in a warm house and a warm bed, and you know. But as you get older, you begin to be impacted, and you begin to, you see what I mean? You get to where you're aware of things like good, bad, so on. Okay? And the mankind is prone toward bad many times, you see. This is the way it is. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave it also to her husband and did eat. So this serpent convinced Eve to do something that was directly commanded against, and to disobey her husband too, because her husband obviously told her, well, this is what Yahweh says, and we ought not to do such and such. She violated the authority of her husband and violated the authority of Yahweh because she was tricked into it, and she fell into that trick. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim amongst the trees of the garden. Now, some commentators say that this was Yeshua pre-incarnate. And Yahweh Elohim called unto Adam and said unto him, where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid. This is Adam speaking back to most likely Yeshua pre-incarnate. Because I was naked and I hid myself. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat? Look at that. And the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Notice this, the man is instantly blaming the woman rather than blaming the real culprit. Guess who the real culprit was? That being. Wouldn't that change the perspective of a man toward his wife if she was in error? If you understand the source of where the defect came from? If you understood that this is spiritual reality she's being impacted by, and it's not within herself. Yes, she fell prey to it, but it's not within herself. But notice what man does here. He immediately just goes to her to blame her, rather than recognizing the larger picture. Go ahead, J-Man.
Could you expound upon what you mean by it's not within her?
What I mean is that we live right now, we're in a fallen world, and there are beings, demons that deceive and lead astray. There are demons that are working through individuals that you might otherwise think are not being affected, but they are being affected. And what happens is when a wife departs from her husband's instruction and somehow she's getting that input, it's likely she's getting the input somehow. Unless you're living somewhere like Grizzly Adams and she has no contact with anything, um, then you're dealing with just the fallen nature. But a lot of times, a wife is getting input from somewhere, and it might even be the object of that input. It's not even aware themselves they're under inspiration of a demon. And so that is what I mean by it's not necessarily within herself that this desire to break Yah's commandment. If the serpent had not been there, would she have done so? I suggest that probably not. But it was the serpent that tempted and basically tricked her in a way that now it was this other thing that was impacting the wife's behavior. Does that make sense? Here's the thing too. The reason why I bring this up is that a lot of times men put their tension directly on their wife rather than going in prayer and doing spiritual warfare and realizing that a lot of their behavior and so on is prompted from something.
Wouldn't that be the case for all of us?
Yes, it would be. But the thing to remember is a man who is walking in Yah's ways is less apt to get deceived than the woman. Remember,
Okay.
Paul talks about that in the New Testament. He says that that woman was deceived first because they're more apt to be deceived, because they're more prone to respond to emotional arguments rather than to concrete facts and logic like men are created to discern things. We got some comments here. The devil wants to keep us from talking to the Father like the liberal and Democrats are trying to raise and not connect to the parents like servant came. Yeah, that's a good comment there. Uh, some Bible studies suggest the physical world that we see is less than 1% of the world described in the Bible. Interesting. That's an interesting thing there, Sandra. Okay. So Eve got deceived. Adam, whether by deception himself or because he knew what would happen if he didn't go along with Eve, he was afraid to lose Eve. He loved Eve. I've heard two arguments on this. Why did Eve then take the fruit? Or why did Adam take the fruit from Eve? First argument is he was bamboozled just the same as her and figured, hey, that does look good. And maybe his appetite got ahead of him. Uh, and the other argument is he knew what he was doing and he was hedging his bet that Yahweh would not destroy both of them because he was afraid Eve would be destroyed. And the reason this second argument gains traction is if you understand what happened the first time around with Adam and this other being that were created on the same level. Uh, okay, that gets into a deep subject that some people don't they don't like to. But think about it. If it so be that this was a separate female entity than Eve, that would make sense because he already had this happen to him. And so this time he was going to put it's like putting all of your money on the poker table and hoping you come out okay. Okay. Uh, You'll have to go and reach out to me later, Jerry, and I'll give you the link to the book. And it explains it. It's too much time to explain all of this, but I believe that this is a different entity being spoken of. Okay. All right. It ties into a lot of things. And Yahweh Elohim said unto the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon your belly shall you go, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. That's interesting. So that seems to indicate that this being was perhaps looked quite different before they got cursed. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and it shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Notice that this devil has a seed. This evil entity has a seed between your seed and the seed of Eve and Adam. Think about that. You ever thought about that? Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In sorrow shall you bring forth children, and your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. So childbearing before that must have been significantly easier than it is now. And your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. Does that seem to indicate that that kind of dynamic wasn't quite as stark before? Saying to think about, huh? And saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake, and sorrow shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Okay, so okay, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake, and sorrow shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. Okay. And the sweat of your face shall you eat bread till you return into the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and unto dust shall you return. Quite a mystical thing that happened here, huh? Quite a mystical thing. It could be described perhaps as, in one sense, they were angelic and could have lived forever, but now they have mortality. Okay. Let's see here. And Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And unto Adam also and to his wife did Yahweh Elohim make coats of skin and clothe them. So that means some animals had to die. But now animals are being killed by violence, by, they give up something to supply. Usually they supply either furs or clothing or meat, right? Elohim said, Behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil, and now lest he put his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. What would happen if that would have happened? That Yahweh wanted to avoid. Well, if Adam had it think about the rise of technology. Think about the rise of technology. Generation after generation. You ever seen that movie about the dinosaurs and how they did these they took something from these dinosaur bones and they created dinosaurs again. That's Jurassic Park series. And it's um, the idea of taking what one scientist does, building on that to where you get the next scientist in the next generation, and then the next generation. Then you see how this knowledge builds up, 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 up. And what do they do with this knowledge? One of the characters says, well, there you go. And he points out these monstrosities that have been created again, and look at all the havoc they caused. Do you see the idea? How the angels were concerned that if this man were to live forever, now that he has access to knowledge, and knowledge, you see, can be used for good and it can be used for evil. But many times, knowledge is used for evil. Think of the atom bomb. How did they come up with the atom bomb? One scientist built upon the knowledge of that scientist, another scientist, another scientist. Pretty soon you have what you need to build something with such destructive force that millions of people could be wiped out. One bomb. You see that? He'll become as one of us to know good and evil. Therefore, Yahweh Elohim sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim. So now there are guardians that keep the man from going into that place where the tree of life is, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Interesting. Okay, let's see here. Any other thoughts? I think we've got just a little bit more, a couple chapters here, and then part of a reading from Genesis 6. There's a lot here. And really, just this one Torah portion, you could spend your life studying all the facets, the various facets. If you want a resource, look at Kent Hovind, Creation Science Evangelism. I'll put it in the chat, Kent Hovind. You want learn a lot about a very biblical view of how the world was? He's kind of a Baptist, so don't necessarily take all your doctrine from him, although he's right on most stuff. But the creation science stuff, it talks about how the world was before the flood. He has a lot on that. Yeah, answers in Genesis, good too. All right. And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from Yahweh. And she again bare his brother Abel, that Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So you've got one guy who likes to keep animals, and these are, very mild animals, and Cain is a tiller of the ground. In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit of the ground an offering unto Yahweh, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. And Yahweh had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Interesting. Now, I have heard it said before that it's because Cain was only bringing vegetables, but Abel was bringing a blood sacrifice. Okay, here's what I have deduced after listening to all these arguments. I think it's more likely that Cain brought the cast-offs of his garden. Have you ever heard of the ugly vegetables? There's actually a company out there that sells ugly vegetables that don't make the cut into the grocery store. They call them uglies or something like that. I can't remember. But there's a company that takes the rejects and sells them at a discounted price. Okay? Yeah, misfits. Misfits. Yahweh doesn't want your misfits, my friends. He wants the best. Now, if that's the case, or if it really was the case that it was a fact, but it seems to me it would be somewhat unfair if you have Cain, who is basically a farmer. That's an entire identity, his existence, and somehow that's rejected by Yahweh. I don't know. I don't know about that. I think it was he was trying to give the misfits to Yahweh. I think that's what it was. But Abel understood you've got to give the best. You don't give the misfits. That's a good one there. So glad that we as misfits are acceptable to Yahweh as long as we make our sacrifice holy and acceptable, which is our reasonable service. That's a great comment there, Brother Giacomo. Yeah. Okay, so here's what happens. Yahweh had respect unto Abel and to his offering. In other words, Yahweh must have given some kind of a signal. Maybe fire came down and consumed it, like what happened with Elijah the prophet on Mount Carmel. I don't know exactly what the sign was. But unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect, dead silence. Usually when there's dead silence, there's no respect. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. And Yahweh said unto Cain, why are you angry, and why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, shall you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lies at the door. Look at that statement. Look at that statement. It's like sin is a crouching lion waiting for you to open the door to something you should not open. And what was the door Cain opened? Greed. Probably greed. Had something to do with greed. And unto you shall be his desire, and you shall rule over him. This statement right here has to do with temptation and overcoming temptation. In other words, you're fighting. It's like what Paul talks about. He's dealing with the old man. He's still struggling. The old man's still struggling to get its way. But it's the spirit man that needs to learn to put the old man down and walk in the spirit, right? Paul references this. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. Now, this is another story there's more to this story, okay? Trust me, there's more to this story. This one verse right here is basically expanded, gives you a lot more details to the book of Jasher. And if that's really the case, what happened is the only book we have that gives us more details. There's no other resource. And Yahweh said unto Cain, where is Abel your brother? Now Yahweh is looking for Abel, but guess what? Abel is dead, slain by his brother Cain. Notice his answer. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Look at the sass on that boy. Not only did he lie, but he's got sass on the lie. Can you see why Yahweh dealt such with Cain the way he dealt? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Look at that statement. You think that might have implication for abortion, violence, murder? When blood hits the ground? Think about that. Does it have a voice? And now are you cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood from my hand. Go ahead, Brother Giacomo.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, man. A quick comment before I get out of here. You notice that in both times when Yahweh, whoops, GPS, sorry. In both times that Yahweh would ask us or asked both Eve and Adam and here Cain that because he's omnipotent and omniscient, he knows already. He saw it. And I think I've been taught before that the question is not where or why, but wherefore, which means explain yourself. He knew that Cain had slain Abel already, but he wanted to have him explain what he did and see if he'd even say the truth to him. On the surface, it does say that at least.
Mm.
And once he said it, like, am I my brother's keeper? Like, no, no, no. You are your brother's keeper. Explain yourself. Explain why you thought that was a good idea.
Yeah. And it was like a test. What would have happened if Cain had shown remorse from the get-go and said, my emotions got the best of me. I got angry at my brother Abel, and I took a stone and I struck him and killed him. Would the punishment have been perhaps less, less severe? I don't know. But look
I'm
what
sure the requirement to confess our sins, was in effect back then and even today, and to come before him and say, I have sinned, please forgive me.
yeah, to take account for one's actions that have been some in the sense of wrongdoing. Yeah, good comments. So now the earth is cursed to Cain. In other words, the very thing that he loved to do, the earth is cursed. Or rather, and now you are cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood from thy hand. When you till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. So, in other words, what happened to Cain is he lost his green thumb. You ever heard of that? He lost his green thumb. I've met some people. I think my grandpa Bostic, he had a green thumb. Anything he put his hand to do could grow just beautifully, just beautifully. Cain lost the thing that he loved most, his green thumb. He loved to farm. He loved to harvest and eat of that. But Yahweh, in his punishment, says, a fugitive and a vagabond shall you be in the earth. And Cain said unto Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that finds me shall slay me. Now, some have supposed, well, does this mean there was a bunch of people on the earth? Remember that these people were living to almost 1,000 years. How many children could you have in 1,000 years? And how many children's children and their children's children and their children's children? Think about that. Uh, and how many generations do you have? Can you fit in 1,000 years? I mean, the lifespan was 10 times what it is now. People were expanding at an exponential rate. Children. And Yahweh said unto him, wherefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Yahweh set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. Now, there's another book that tells about how Cain got slain. Did you know that? We don't get that detail in Genesis, but that detail is in the book of Jasher. And Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt. It was actually by a mistake. It didn't happen by will. It was a mistake that happened. And Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived. So Cain found a wife and bare Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Interesting. And also Enoch was born Irad. And Arad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. Interesting. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. And Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. Interesting. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and the organ. Interesting. So you got a musician in the family, and you've got a cattleman in that family. And Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Now, this may be about weapons. About this time, weapons were introduced, and this intersects too, possibly. Maybe implements for farming, that could be that too. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Hearken to my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, this right here, and a young man to my hurt. For years I wondered, what does this mean? Well, the man was his forefather Cain, but he didn't slay them. It was his son that slayed Cain. That's essentially what it says in the book of Jasher. And it was in the field, and Cain was out there, and he had, Cain was an old hoary headed. He looked like an animal. It kind of reminded me of how Nebuchadnezzar turned out, when he was exalting himself above Yahweh, and he turned into like this wild, and his son thought he was an animal and pulled the bow and the arrow and slew him. And then here is the great grandson, looking to see his grandfather. I think it's his grandfather or great grandfather on the ground, and he slaps his son, and the force of the slap kills his son. And his wives now are angry, very angry at their husband because he killed their son too. You see, Jasher talks about that. And hey, there's no other resource that tells us this story. So, I'm just letting you guys know there's a story out there. Makes this make sense. If Cain be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold, because his wives were looking for a way to kill him. That's tragic. And Adam knew his wife again, and that switches gears now. Now we're back to the line of Adam. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. For Elohim said, she hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of Yahweh. Now, this here is a curious statement, isn't it? I've seen some discussions about this, exactly what this means. In some discussions, it says that in the Hebrew, it seems to say that men began to disregard the name of Yahweh. Now, you'll have to study that out for yourself and see what that means. But there does seem to be a general digression. From Adam, things seem to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, doesn't it? And if men were calling upon the name of Yahweh, remember that Cain probably was calling upon the name of Yahweh, and so was Abel, in order to get his response to their offering. You see? But so this maybe at that time men began to disregard the name of Yahweh. I've seen a good study on this, and maybe that's really what it means. You'll have to study that out for yourself. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that Elohim created man, in the likeness of Elohim made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. You know what I think this means when it says after his image? It means after his God-bearing image. In other words, Seth was a good boy. He followed the ways of his daddy. He was a good boy, not like Cain, who departed from his daddy's image and slew his brother Abel. And the days of Adam, after he had begotten Seth, was 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. Notice that Adam had a lot more sons and daughters. 800 years. That's a lot of sons and daughters you can beget in 800 years, isn't it? You see now how this is fitting together, how mankind began to just exponentially, when you have that much time, you have a lot more children you can create. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Look at that, 930 years, almost 1,000 years. And Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 850 years and begat sons and daughters. Now notice, you see, if you have one son, he's getting married after about 100 years. He's having sons and daughters. And now for another 700-800 years, he's having a bunch of sons and daughters. And guess what? Then his sons have sons and daughters. And then his sons, you see how it's exponential. It's exponential. No, I think what happened was did Cain marry his sister? I believe Cain married one of these. It may have been hundreds of years before he married one of these great granddaughters of one of these other. He married. That's what I think. I don't think he married his direct sister. I think it was a great down the line. Okay. Think of it. She may have been, let's see, they were getting married around 100. She may have been 100, and he may have been, 300. Even within 300 years, how many children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren? You see how mankind was spreading? So that's what I think. That's my opinion on that, Mary. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalalel. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalalel 840 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Got another one here. Does the text indicate when women were marrying? No, it doesn't, but I'm judging by the fact that so far we see that when men get into their hundreds, in other words, remember, we're talking about a lifespan that's almost 1,000 years. So does that mean, now, have you ever read the prophecy that says that how does it go? A child shall be like 100 years old, a child should be as 100 years old? In other words, it seems to indicate that 100-year mark as when a child gets past that, now he's ready to marry. That's in Isaiah, I think. This is talking about the Atid Lavo, which is the millennial kingdom, when Messiah returns, and the lifespan of those who make it into that kingdom are going to be just like this. Maybe as much as almost close to 1,000 years old. Yahweh's going to restore that. When Yeshua returns, he's going to restore this condition. Yeah, you're right, J-Man. And remember, that was after the flood when lifespans were greatly decreased. So now they're, in her 20s, probably mid-20s there. But what I'm talking about here is lifespans were greatly expanded, and maybe maturity was slower. You ever thought about that? How long does it take for a boy to reach puberty? Here's what I suggest to you. If the metric is 10, because you say 100 years now, you're lucky if you get to 100 years. But back then, you're lucky if you get to 970. Okay? That's like a factor of 10. If it so be that puberty is between 12 and 13, put that into a factor of 10. What do you get? Get about 111, 100 and somewhere in there. You see? Now they're ready for marriage. You see, because the growth rate, if you've got a much larger, in other words, the maturity level is slowed down greatly. That's why I believe it says around 100 they're marrying. Does that make sense? All right, Mahalalel lived 60 and 5 years, begat Jared. And Mahalalel lived after he begat Jared 830 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalalel were 890 and 5 years, and he died. And Jared lived 160 and 2 years, and begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 960 and 2 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 60 and 5 years, and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with Elohim after he begat Methuselah 300 years. Now, if you divide that by a factor of 10, what do you get? 30 years old. What does that remind you of? Didn't Yeshua come into his full ministry around 30? That makes sense. Around 30 or so. Interesting. And begat sons and daughters, and all the days of Enoch were 360 and 5 years, and Enoch walked with Elohim, and he was not. What does that remind you of? Yeshua's ministry was a very short amount of time, and then what? He was on the cross, and then he came out of the grave in a resurrected body, and he went up into the clouds. Remember? And the angels were by the disciples as they were just steadfastly looking up, and they said, "Hey, men of Judea, why are you looking up there? Don't you know that Yeshua is going to come back in the same way that he went up?" Look at this. Factor the 10 put in there. Okay? See all the cycles? You see the patterns here? Elohim took him, and Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years and begat sons and daughters. They are making babies like crazy. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. 969. Look at that. Just shy of 1,000. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son, and he called his name Noah. There's where we get Noah, saying, "This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which Yahweh hath cursed." And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, there's a lot of details here. All right, any comments, thoughts on this? All right, let's finish up. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim, notice this phrase right here. Do you want to know who the sons of Elohim are? Read the book of Enoch that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has in their Bible. And you'll see who the sons of Elohim, they're not good guys. Saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took the wives, all of which they chose. That one verse right there, an entire book has been written. And what its providence is, I believe Enoch literally did write this book, and it's been passed down. It was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's only one other theory that tries to explain this outside of the book of Enoch, and conveniently they say, the book of Enoch is rubbish. Very convenient. Very convenient. The same book that New Testament writers quoted multiple times. I like to say that to them because they don't even realize that. But this is an important thing to look into. It's in the book of Enoch. And Yahweh said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There's a lot of bad stuff that you can do if you are prone toward evil and you're living. Imagine if Hitler lived to almost 1,000 years. Well, we'd all be doing the Nazi salute probably, wouldn't we? Think about that. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown. You know who these mighty men were? Have you ever heard of, let me think here. I got to go back to my Greek mythology. Oh, help me out, guys. You know the son of Zeus? Hercules. Hercules. You ever wonder where the Greeks and the Romans got these stories of gods having sex with human women and producing these men of renown, these mighty men, Hercules? You see, even mythology betrays a reality. And Elohim saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Think about this. You know what I could suggest to you too? The advance of technology. That's something else you learn in the Book of Enoch. Technology. No, we're not the only technological age, my friends. We're actually not quite there yet. Not quite there. How do we know this? Have you ever read Heinrich Deineken's book, Chariot of the Gods? Read that book, and you're going to begin to see the proofs that have been left in the earth of a highly technological, wicked world before the flood. And it repented Yahweh that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And Yahweh said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. All right. There's a lot there. And so many subjects could be discussed from just this first portion. There's so many things that you could search out, and you'd live your whole life and you still wouldn't search it all out. Trust me. I'm still like just the chipping away, just the surface of it. Just the surface of it that's here in Genesis. One of the greatest books. Okay, so that is our Torah portion section. Our song for today is a song by Joshua Aaron.
It grew to a tree. It's a divine story about the King of Glory. From Abraham to the Lamb, it's an adoption story. How you and I could be one big family. Like the stars in the sky, like the sand in the sea, sisters and brothers joined to the family tree. The root of Jesse, Yeshua can set you free. If you just believe, come join me, and together we will be one big family. If you believe, come join me. Grafted into one family tree. If you believe in the King who gave his life upon the tree.
That was Joshua Aaron. Planted a tree, planted a seed, become a tree. That's one of the lines in there. It's a great one big family. I think it's a song. Okay, so this is what the book of Jasher says. Whilst it was the beginning, darkness overspread the face of nature, or the face of the earth, and the ether moved up on the surface of the chaos. And it came to pass that a great light shone forth from the firmament and enlightened the abyss. Interesting, that terminology. And the abyss fled before the face of the light and divided between the light and the darkness, so that the face of nature was formed a second time. Interesting. And behold, there appeared in the firmament two great lights, the one to rule the light and the other to rule the darkness. And the ground brought forth grass and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree after his kind, and every beast after his kind, and everything that creeps after their kind. And the waters brought forth the moving creatures after their kind, and the ether brought forth every winged fowl after his kind. And when all these things were fulfilled, behold, Yahweh appeared in Eden and created man and made him to be an image of his own eternity. Interesting phraseology there. And to him was given power and lordship over all living creatures and over every herb and over every tree of the field. And it came to pass in the process of time that the man begat Cain, and he also begat his brother Abel. And Cain was the first man who tilled the ground. And Abel was a feeder of sheep, and Cain went out and dwelt on the east of Eden in the land of Nod. Now, notice it jumps some of the story from Genesis, doesn't it? And Cain begat Enoch. Then did men begin to build cities, and unto Lamech was born Jabal. He was the first who taught men to build tents. And unto Lamech also was born Tubal-Cain. He was the first who wrought in brass and iron, and he builded up the harp and the organ. And Seth begat Enos. And then began men by name to call on Yahweh. Now that notice how they interpret that part here. And so it seems this is a more it seems to indicate that when they begin to call on Yahweh, but it also, remember, it could mean that they are either cursing Yahweh or they are disregarding Yahweh. And all the days of the life of Adam, there was rest and peace and quiet unto all men. For they listened unto all things concerning which he spoke unto them, and Adam lived 930 years, and he died. I'm not sure about that one. How could there be peace if I guess if you figure that the time between the creation of Adam at his fall, in other words, from the fall of Adam, was that about 1,000 years from the time of the flood, somewhere in there? That's interesting there to study that one out, but that's what Jasher has to say. Okay, now we're just going to read this first part here. And remember, these scriptures are second Exodus. We're talking about restoration scriptures because we are in that day. Micah 4, and in the last days it shall come to pass, the mountain of the house of Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it. What is the timing of this? I believe that this is Yeshua who's returned to the earth and established his kingdom. And now people are going to, those who are survivors after the desolations, they're going to see there's a new sheriff in town because it says his glory is going to fill the earth. The earth will not even need the light of the sun and the moon. The glory of Yeshua is going to fill the earth. And somehow they're going to know where to go. And it says, many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways. Who's the he there? Yeshua. And we will walk in his paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Have you ever wondered about that parable that Yeshua said about the man who was a businessman, and he committed certain number of pieces of money to his servants? To one servant, he gave one piece. To another, he gave five. Let's see, how did that go? No, to another, he gave two. And to another, he gave five. Okay. So he said, look, put my money on deposit. I want you to do something with it because when I come back, you better show something for it. Now, the guy that had the one coin, he didn't do it. He just said, my master's a hard man. I'm just going to bury it and make sure he gets it back. And I'll just do whatever I want during the time that master's away. The guy with two, he got busy. And he made 5 by the time master. The guy with 5, he made 10. Notice how it says, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. How's that going to happen? Well, Yeshua gives us the clue in the parable. He says that the one who made 5, he says, you go take charge of 5 cities. The one who doubled the money and made it 10, he said, you go take charge of 10 cities. You know who I think these people are? I think they are the redeemed of Yahweh. They're the redeemed who make it in the first resurrection. At the coming of Yeshua, it says the dead in Christ shall rise, and then we which remain shall be caught up in the air and changed in the twinkling of an eye. We're those people. And guess what? Whatever we've done with our time on this earth, when Yeshua establishes his kingdom, we're going to be the ones teaching the nations. That's essentially what's being shown here. Okay? And the knowledge of Yahweh is going to spread all over the earth. How? Because we're going to be tasked with looking after cities and teaching. And he shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Now, if you read the book of Enoch, you'll see where war came from. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of Yahweh of hosts has spoken it. Right now in America, you could be working for the man, and if you're lucky, he'll give you 1 fig. But imagine an economic system to where you have your own vine and your own fig tree, and you get to have all of the figs that that vine and fig tree produce. You hear what I'm saying here? You understand? For all people will walk, everyone in the name of his Elohim, and we will walk in the name of Yahweh Elohim forever and ever. All right, that's the first one. There's a lot there. This is the second Exodus scripture. Okay, Isaiah 35, 1 through 7. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. This is talking about prophecies that relate to the land of Israel that's going to blossom and bloom in the latter day when the captivity of Judah is released and they're returned back to the land. Are we in those days? Yes. You know when the guy that wrote, what was his name? Samuel Clemens, when he visited the Holy Land over 100 years ago, he said, why would anybody want to come here? This is a desolate waste. But then in 1948, Israel was established as a nation, the Jews. And by the way, did you know that initially they wanted to call that land Judah, not Israel? But they didn't quite have enough votes, and so they decided to call it by the general name Israel. Did you know that? Ever since they've gotten there, the desert is bloomed and blossomed. They have done irrigation. They've done incredible things. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of Yahweh and the excellency of our Elohim. Strengthen you the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. That sounds a lot like what James says, doesn't it? You see? You ever read that in the book of James? Say to them that are fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your Elohim will come with vengeance, even Elohim with a recompense. That sounds like the judgment. That sounds like Yeshua returning to judge the earth. He will come and save you. That sounds like in the nick of time. You ever read Zechariah chapter 14, where the enemy and half the city is taken and the women are ravished, but the other half of the city is protected by Yahweh? In other words, the enemies that all come against Jerusalem, they're not able to totally destroy them. Because at that time, it says Yahweh will go out and fight against those nations as he fought in the day of battle. You ever read that? Behold, your Elohim will come with vengeance, even Elohim with a recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be open, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. You know what that sounds like? Remember when Yeshua was saying of the Jews, he said they have ears that cannot hear and eyes that cannot see. It's a spiritual blindness. Remember, it's that Yeshua said, you shall not see me again until you say what? Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Are the Jews going to turn at the very end before annihilation? Yes, they're going to turn. The remaining survivors of the Jews are going to turn and realize that of the one whom they pierced, they will mourn as a mother mourns for a son that's died. That's what Scripture says. Their eyes are going to be opened. The ears will be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out and streams in the desert. You know what that sounds like? You ever read Zechariah chapter 14, where it says Yeshua returns, sets foot on the Mount of Olives? And it says a spring comes out and it goes down into the sea, and it cleanses the waters of the earth. And then it says plants spring up, yielding 12 different types of fruits along. And guess what? The leaves are for the healing of the nations. This is all Atid Lavo. This is all millennial reign stuff that's going to happen. Waters will break out in streams of the desert, and the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water, and the habitation of dragons. That's an interesting phrase there. Where each lay shall be grass with reeds and rushes. Not sure what that exactly is. Dragons. There's some I could say about that, but we don't have time. Look into Marco Polo and his writings on the Chinese emperor, or was it the Chinese? Yeah, the Chinese emperor. Read the book by Marco Polo if you want to get a little bit on this right here. Read that book. There's also a book in the Apocrypha, and it has to do with Nebuchadnezzar. Well, that's all I'm going to tell you on that. All right, last one in the prophets. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your seed from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. This is a scripture that tells us that several other scriptures that we can stack together that show us that it's not pie in the sky, pre-tribulation rapture. That's not it, my friends. Yahweh is going to preserve you through the tribulation, and he's going to gather his people and get the nations to release you, and you're going to grow. You're going to go, the remnant, just like what happened to the children of Israel in Egypt. When Yahweh had to put plagues upon them, that's the whole point of the plagues in the book of Revelation. That's the whole point, is to force the nations to give you up so that you can go back to your inheritance. And he says he's going to bring everybody from the east, the west, the north, and the south. And this is a scripture here that seems to indicate that as well. All right, now we are in the New Testament. Let's see what we have. We have any comments on that? Any questions? I covered a lot. So, if you want to, if you have a question, I'll give you some resources or try to give you a quick answer. All right. Let's go to Titus 1. Paul, a servant of Yahweh and an apostle of Yahushua the Messiah, according to the faith of Yahweh's elect, and the acknowledging of the truth, which is after reverence, in hope of eternal life, which Elohim, who does not lie, promised before the world began. Notice this preamble. Paul was really good at that, wasn't he? He would really, very, very flowery language. But hath in due time manifested his word through preaching. Right now we have to preach, just like I'm doing, which is committed unto me according to the command of Elohim, our Savior, to Titus, mine own son, after the common faith, favor, mercy, and peace from Yahweh the Father and the Master Yahushua the Messiah, our Savior. All of that just in a greeting. Look at that ornate greeting that Paul gives to Titus. He goes on, for this cause left I you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are wanting and ordain elders in every city, as I have appointed you. So what was Titus's job? To set up church structure, assembly structure, wasn't it? To ordain elders. And here's the instructions he's given to Titus. If any be blameless, the husband of a wife, we talked about that before, is most likely the indefinite article. A wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. For a bishop must be blameless as the steward of Yahweh, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre. That's quite a bit there, isn't it? In other words, he should be teachable. He should have a certain ability to maintain his temper. He should not be a drunkard, and he should not be a brawler, somebody who likes to get into fights with people. And he should not be greedy. Look at all those 5 categories of what's required to be a leader of the assembly. But these are the things he should show: a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, set apart, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and convince the gainsayers. In other words, he needs to know the Bible pretty well, doesn't he? Because you got rascals out there trying to dispute the Bible or the truth, and he needs to know it. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision. Who were the circumcision? They were the Jews, and many of them were converts to Yeshua in a way. In a way, they regarded Yeshua in a positive way. But you know what they did? They underwent something called Hatafat Dam Brit. And what that means is they not only subjected themselves to the direction of the rabbis who were unbelievers, but they subjected themselves to their teaching. And they were trying to get believers to come under. It would be like Baptists trying to get Methodists to become Baptists, because the Baptists believed they were the only true holders of truth. Okay? Similar to that. That's who these guys were. Not the people who teach that the 4th commandment or the Sabbath or that clean eating or that feast days are still relevant today. That's not who those guys were. That's us. We're the Nazarenes. These guys, also known as the concision, were the guys who wanted people who came to a faith in Yeshua to merge into the Judaism network. And that means you have to make a bunch of compromises, don't you? That means you have to add a bunch of stuff that's not even in Scripture. That means you have to take away stuff that is in Scripture. You see? For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially the of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things what they ought not. What are some of those things perhaps they're teaching that they ought not? Yeshua rebuked them for it. Remember, he said that the Pharisees have this teaching that you don't have to take care of your mommy and daddy in their old age. All you have to do is take all that money you've stored up to do that and give it to the synagogue. And they will call it korban. And you could just let your mom and daddy rot in their old age. And it'll be okay. God will let you in the kingdom. That's a doctrine of hell. That's the kind of stuff they were teaching, because that's what the Pharisees were teaching. You see, that's just one example of many examples. Or how about this one? They were teaching that, let's say you had a lamb chop that you wanted to eat. And if you didn't have a representative of the synagogue, let's say you had a party and you had lamb chops that you wanted to eat, okay? And you had to have a representative of the synagogue there, and they had to pronounce a particular type of blessing over that food, or guess what? They considered that food as if it were swine. Hear what I'm saying? Okay? And Yeshua rebuked them for that kind of thing. You see? Because they kept wanting everybody to be under their church. You ever run into some church folks like that want you to be part of their brand? They want you to follow their brand of Christianity. Okay? But you know, if you know the word in any way, you'll know that they're right about some things, but guess what? They're wrong about a lot of things. And if you put yourself under men, you're going to get the outcome of man. You're not going to get the outcome of Elohim. Okay, you understand? I'll say it again. If you put yourself under men, you're going to get the outcomes of men. But if you put yourself under Elohim and become his student, you're going to get the outcomes of Elohim. You see the difference? Whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teach things what they ought not, for filthy lucre's sake. One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said the Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. This witness is true. Paul didn't have very high regard, did he, for Cretians? Wherefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. There was a lot of fables. The Jews in their Talmud have all kinds of fables in there. How about the Jews' fable? And excuse me for saying this, but somebody needs to. They literally say that Yeshua Messiah is boiling in excrement in hell. They say horrible things. That's just probably the most horrible that you'll come across in Talmud. They are perverted. They are horrible things those Jews say in that book. And it's indefensible. But there was a lot of that being taught. Then, unto the pure, all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure, but even their mind and conscience is defiled. So if that lamb chop is clean, because lamb is clean to eat, and they think that it's just like eating pig, unless you have that sort of that blessing, that special blessing pronounced. That's all part of Talmud. That's all part of them trying to put their authority into every aspect of your life. But you can partake of that lamb chop because it's been given to you by Elohim and it's a clean animal. You don't have to have their incantation of sorts over it. That's essentially what was going on, a lot of that. They profess that they know Yahweh, but in works they deny him, just like that mother and father where they pronounce Korban. They deny him in that because it says you shall honor your mother and father, doesn't it? Being abominable and disobedient and unto every good work reprobate. Look at that. Reprobate. These are primarily these rabbinical followers, these Talmud followers. Now, the church has got this all switched around. They say, oh, that's you guys, speaking of us, we're trying to teach people to come back to the commandments, the 10 commandments. That's wrong. They just don't understand. Church people don't understand that. They don't understand what was going on in the first century. You want a book, a resource that really goes into some of this, get Avi Ben Mordecai's Galatians, a first century commentary. Avi Ben Mordecai. Look that up. You can get it and study this stuff out, okay? All right, we're going to finish our service up. Let's finish it up. We're going to sing the song of peace. And this is the song, Shalom, my friends. And it's been a pleasure presenting here today with you guys. So glad you guys come. It's been a blessing to have you here. And I like to hear the comments too. And here is Shalom, my friends. Shalom to you now. Shalom, my friends. May Yahweh's mercies bless you well, my friends, in all your living and through your loving. Yahweh be your shalom, shalom, shalom. Yahweh be your shalom. Now, the Aaronic benediction. As you go throughout this week, remember, our Heavenly Father, He loves you. He's given you instructions. Read them, study them, pray for one another, and you'll be blessed. That doesn't mean you won't encounter tough times and tests in life. Doesn't mean that at all. It means He's going to help you through them because you've got Him to depend upon. And He is ultimately dependable. I'll say it again. The Master Yah is dependable. He comes in the nick of time, and He's there when you need Him. So trust Him. Trust Him. Yivarekeka Yahweh vayishmareka. Yahweh, Yahweh, Panabaleka, Vikuneka. Yise Yahweh, Panavaleka, Biasam Leka, Leka Shalom. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua Messiah, Prince of Peace. Amen. Remember what was spoken to Joshua? Here he was trying to fit into the shoes of Moses. Do you ever feel like maybe you just don't have what it takes? Don't worry. Nobody has what it takes without Yahweh. But with Yahweh and his Son, all things are possible. And here it is, Hazak, Hazak, Banit Hazak, be strong, and may we be strengthened.